Corbin Burnes, George Kirby, and Andrew Abbott were all awesome on Thursday. We'll break those down and preview Week 18 up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aarondola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu, Tectocano, and Fado. Value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Clubs, hit some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on July 21st. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris the Welsh. Today on the show, we had some awesome pitching performances. What do we do with Byron Buxton, Week 18 sleepers, 2-star pitchers, and much more? Before we get started, please like this video and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, download, follow, and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. We really do appreciate it. Welsh, meet Scott. Scott, meet Welsh. I feel like you guys haven't been on together in a long time.
It's so funny. When we got on the stream, Frank went away, and I was just sitting here alone, just looking at your blank screens. And then Scott came in, and it was like slow, magical. And he sat down, and I said, "Oh my God, Scott White! I haven't seen that face in ages." And he had a big smile, like, "Who is this guy?" It feels like it's been like months and months, but it's probably only been like 3 weeks or so. But I'm happy to see your face, dude. Very joyous Scott White face.
It's been a while because like we try to make it so I can skip one day a week on the podcast, just because I got a lot of other stuff to do too, and it happens to be the day that we have the Welsh on. But I don't know. You got bumped to Thursday this week, so
yeah,
here we are.
My fault. But you know what? I might do this occasionally. I might really make Frank's life difficult occasionally, being like, "Yeah, I can't make that show, so let's come over here." Because I do enjoy seeing it. Not that I don't enjoy Towers, but it is nice doing some shows with you again.
Welsh, we're an open book, man. Whenever you want to hop on, we can make it work. Wednesday, Thursday, Monday, it doesn't matter to me. Let's just do it.
Let's go.
Every time someone says the words, "It's been a while," I automatically think of the song. It just happens every time. It's been a while. Scott said it somewhere in there, and my mind just instantly goes there.
I'd like to actually pinpoint all of the phrases that do that. I think I can't at this moment think of them, but you're right. When I hear "it's been a while," we all want to do "it's been a while." There are definitely other phrases we have that induce songs, and I would love to hear from anybody that has any of those, and we can present. It's almost like a team name, the team name game. We could just do it for phrase songs. Please.
I'll reveal one more for me. I don't know if this happens for either of you. Every time I hear the word "necessary," I think of dodgeball. And I'm just going to leave that there. Let's jump into Thursday's action.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Oh, my. Scott, you were up first. Oh, my goodness gracious. Player of the night.
I'm going to go with Tyler Glasnow, who had a great start against a great offense. Struck out 9 against the Orioles over 7 innings. Nice to see him pitching that deep into games. Walked nobody. 9 strikeouts, no walks. That's great. He had, 16 whiffs in all, 9 on the curveball, 5 on the slider. Both of those pitches, by the way, just have insane whiff rates, 45% and up on both of those breaking balls. Tyler Glasnow in his last 5 starts, a 2.45 ERA, 107 whip, 15.3 K per 9. And his swinging strike rate overall is 18.3%. The only qualifier who has a swinging strike rate that high is exactly who you'd expect. It's Spencer Strider. Nobody else is as high as 16% even. And Tyler Glasnow's clocking in at 18.3% here. All of which is to say that I think we can say definitively Tyler Glasnow is back and pitching like an ace. And during a time in baseball history, certainly during a particular season in which the pitching class seems to consist of a very large middle tier of guys who are all susceptible to a blow up or two every now and then, and you can't really count on them to be a differentiator for your team. Tyler Glasnow seems like one of the few pitchers who very much is a differentiator. Who knows how long he'll stay healthy, but for now, you should let him differentiate you and just enjoy it and not think about selling high or anything like that.
Any coincidence that we find this definitive he's back as Oppenheimer is releasing? Anybody? Any Cillian Murphy, Tyler Glasnow, Oppenheimer's out? We're all good?
Yeah, I knew exactly where you were going with that. You're saying they look alike, right? Is that
they look identical? They're the same human being.
Scott, I don't know if you're aware of.
Identical.
Is it Cillian Murphy or Killian Murphy, Welsh?
Ooh, I thought it was Cillian Murphy. So if it's Killian, news to me.
So they do look very similar. So there might be something to that. Scott, you're trying to talk because
I know you were trying. I was like trying to decipher what you were saying. What was happening here? Were you
not hear me?
No, we couldn't hear.
Were
you saying Killian?
I was saying Killian. You couldn't hear me?
No.
Your mic sounds good now though. I think it just cut out for a second.
I think it's Killian Murphy, but don't kill the messenger, is what I said.
Don't kill Liam the messenger. I think it's Killian as well, but it's all right, Welsh. We'll let you slide for the reference. They do look very similar. So I think that's a fair point out there. After I saw this start, I moved Tyler Glasnow up to SP21, and you could probably argue he's going to pitch like a low-end SP1, high-end SP2 as long as he's healthy. But because of that injury risk, that's why I think he's a little bit further down the rankings. But I noticed the same things as you, Scott, just kind of going across the board. The strikeout rate looks fantastic, 50% ground ball rate, the FIP 331, the XFIP 262. Everything looks really, really good for Tyler Glasnow. He just has to stay on the mound. That's the biggest thing for him. Well, so let's slide over to you. Oh, my goodness gracious. Another awesome pitcher from Thursday.
Andrew Abbott. Man, 8 innings, 1 hit, 6 strikeouts, couple walks, lowering that ERA down to 2. And in this start, was just taking a look, obviously, at what are the things that he did. His sweeper was effective, 37% swing and miss rate, 24 on the fastball. He had 7 whiffs, by the way, on that sweeper, which he threw 30 of them. 29 on the changeup and 50 on the curveball, and he kind of lowered the curveball percentage. He went really heavy sweeper here because most of the year he's been fastball, actually curveball, and then sweeper. And I've had 2 things sitting in my mind. So Eno Saris and I were talking about Andrew Abbott. He's being a little anti-Andrew Abbott because the fastball, in the stuff plus metric world kind of stinks. It's got a bad number. I think it's in like the 70s, he said. One of the things that stood out we were talking about was the release point is very similar. Andrew Abbott does a really good job on release point between those 2 pitches, which is starting to make me think that's making the fastball more effective. And then I started thinking about just like comps. I've been trying to decipher because I think Andrew Abbott is kind of an anomaly because it isn't a magical fastball at the end of the day. It was in this game, he touched 94. He averages 92. That was actually down on the year average, which is almost 93. He throws a median sweeper and a little bit more of a power-ish curveball in the lower 80s. And I was just kind of trying to figure out, is there a guy that I could put a comp on? Because I don't know if you guys have thought about, like, who does Andrew Abbott remind you of? And it just popped in my head statistically of somebody. And I came across Sonny Gray. And I don't know if you guys are going to be able to buy into it. But Sonny Gray, similar velo numbers. You've also got a curveball sweeper. That's kind of your big 3 primary pitch. Obviously, Sonny's got the sinker. They both throw changeups. But there were just I don't know, eerie similarities between the 2 players that I wonder if Andrew Abbott could get to that place because Sonny Gray's fastball plays up a little bit. He's getting more whiffs on the secondaries that I think we could get there with Abbott. The bigger difference is Sonny Gray works a little bit higher in the zone on the fastball, and Abbott's not getting the swing and misses necessarily on the sweeper. That's sitting a little bit more in the zone, and because he's covering the bottom of the zone with the changeup. And all of this is just me trying to figure him out. And I don't know if you guys have figured him out because the stuff doesn't match the numbers. And that's new baseball worry more than old baseball. Because old baseball, it's 92 miles an hour with good command. We don't think much about it. But a guy with a 92 mile an hour fastball and not crazy insane whiff secondaries is just kind of an anomaly to me. So I threw out Sonny Gray as maybe someone to kind of dream on Abbott maybe being in the future.
I think in terms of the fastball and the 2 breaking pitches, perhaps, but you're right. Andrew Abbott is kind of an anomaly because he's such a fly ball heavy pitcher. 61% fly balls. That is exactly the word. It is anomalous. It's
and the worst ballpark for that to be.
Exactly.
And it's not like they are lightly hit fly balls, the kind that would work to a pitcher's benefit because they're just going to land in an outfielder's glove. His average exit velocity is 91 miles per hour, which is 11th percentile among starting pitchers. So and he does give up a lot of home runs. Like he has given up a lot of home runs during the time he's been up. It's just that's like all he's given up. So apart from one terrible start, it hasn't hurt Andrew Abbott at all. He's been very tough to figure out. I've used the Joe Ryan comp for him before, just because they both have that fastball that at first glance when it seems special. But Abbott walks a lot more guys than Ryan does. So is that giving Abbott too much credit?
That's why I kind of went to Sonny Gray, because Sonny Gray, I believe this year is at 9.7%. And it kind of lives up in that general range every year, where Abbott's 8.6. And funny enough, we both landed on Twins pitchers, by the way.
Early on, when he was getting no strikeouts, I thought it was easy. Oh, so high on Abbott, this can't last. But then the strikeouts have come along, and again, apart from that one disastrous start, he's seemingly gotten better and better. So, I mean, I would still be happy to trade him for the right offer. But if I'm just being offered another one of that big glob of mid-tier pitchers for him, I'm probably not going to do it. If I'm offered, I don't know, what's a high-end pitcher that you could reasonably.
It's the name we bring up every podcast, Scott. It's Sandy Alcantara.
Well, yeah, but like let's say somebody offers you Aaron Nola for Abbott and something else modest. Okay, that's a clear enough pitching upgrade. But if it's Abbott, if somebody wants to do like an Abbott for Chris Bassett exchange, or just somebody else, another pitcher in that glove,
Pablo Lopez.
That's an interesting name.
I was going to bring up a tweener. He's kind of a tweener because I feel like Pablo Lopez should be a high-end pitcher and is performing like part of the glob. I think I'd swap Abbott for Lopez. Yeah.
What about you, Darvish?
Yeah, another tweener, but I'd do it.
I would do that too. Just when you look at Abbott, he's had 5 straight starts where he was 1/3 of an inning away from 5 straight quality starts. So 4 of the last 5 have been quality starts. He's gone 6 and 4 of the last 5 is what I'm saying. And he went 5 2/3 2 starts ago. I don't think he's given up an earned run in the last 3 starts. He is the biggest anomaly. And I hate to say it, anomalies like those, I feel like in the past tend to be huge blow up in our face disasters long term. But I just don't know what to make of him. Everything screams weirdness. And I'm just trying to figure him out. And I think the only thing I didn't do here was go and look at release point comps, like going on to Brooks and looking at the actual release points of both of these. But, Eno had confirmed with me that the fastball curveball is very similar. And you're seeing so much more usage of sweepers and sliders in baseball right now. They're getting hit harder because we're seeing so much more, that if you have got similar release points with multiple breaking pitch offerings and you can command it, that could set you apart. Maybe that's why he's overpassing a lot of his statistics. It's just, this fastball is just so odd to me. And I could keep saying the same thing about him, but it'll be interesting to see at the end of the year what it looks like. But he is a crazy one.
Well, you're right about the anomalies usually blowing up in our faces, because the thing about an anomaly is you can't really recognize it as an anomaly until after the fact, in retrospect. Because if you try to identify the anomaly before it happens, then it's not really an anomaly,
Yeah,
it's identifiable.
He might just pitch to a sub-3 ERA the rest of the season, and we'll just keep saying the same thing. Like, he should be giving up more home runs, but for some reason he doesn't. And
he's given up a lot of home runs.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Adolis Garcia thing from last year. The last 2 years, we're just like, this is going to, like, the expected batting, this is not going to work. He's going to come up, and it just never actually happens. Though Adolis had bigger physical attributes that we could play on, where Andrew Abbott's lacking. This isn't like a 97-mile-an-hour fastball. It's a lacking fastball with, I don't even think, like, overtly awesome secondary pitches. He just commands and I think hides it well, and he's figured out baseball right now.
Somebody in the chat said they traded Andrew Abbott for Jose Barrios. Would we do that?
I think that's very even.
I think they're similarly ranked. I have them both inside my top 50 now.
Right. Barrios feels like he's part of the glob. Like I'd rank him ahead of Abbott, but I'd be a little reluctant to do that.
I mean, we've seen Barrios do what we're fearing Abbott might do. Like we've seen Barrios just implode and fall apart. 5 starts, 6 earned runs, every single start, not walking. We're fearful Abbott could do that, but he's been playing really well right now. I think that's a trade that you get Barrios and you're like, okay, you did fine. I don't think you won. I don't think you lost. Maybe if Abbott falls apart, it's going to seem a little bit better. But yeah, that's like the same tiered glob. You just kind of traded maybe something you're worried is going to fall apart to the thing you know better.
All right, last point on Abbott, and I'll let this just stew in your minds, but I think a reasonable comp, based on last year too, is actually Nestor Cortez, because he had this kind of fastball that was working last year, lots of fly balls, cutter, slider, 2 secondaries there. Just thought of it, but it seems like it kind of makes sense. Nestor Cortez last year to Andrew Abbott this year. Oh my goodness gracious, for me, I want to highlight Corbin Burnes. New half, new Burnes. Back-to-back starts with double-digit strikeouts at the Phillies. 8 shutout innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 10 strikeouts with 15 swinging strikes on 100 pitches, and 15-plus swinging strikes in each of the past 2 starts. What has he done differently? He's throwing his curveball more in both of these starts. 18% usage on the season. It was 29% in his last start and 26% curveball usage in this start. And for what it's worth, his curveball has been his best pitch this year. 118 batting average against with a 44% whiff rate. All of a sudden, mid-3s ERA. The whip is in the low 1s, over a strikeout per inning. It kind of looks like Corbin Burnes is getting back to doing Corbin Burnes things.
Yeah, it does. And he's had the velocity back up for a while now. So I kind of saw it going this way. I moved him back into my top 5 at starting pitcher after moving him toward the bottom of the top 10 earlier in the year. And I think, I don't know that you can trust Corbin Burnes to be the Corbin Burnes we've known the past couple years, because I don't think any pitcher in this environment is that. I don't think anyone's quite that reliable. But yeah, he's one of the top 5 pitchers in fantasy, I'd say.
Yeah, and all along, expected ERA has still liked Corbin Burnes. It's a 3.57 xERA. Some of the other ERA estimators are a little bit higher, but that one has remained strong. So it looks like finally we're getting ace Corbin Burnes back, and hopefully he can build off this consistency. While we're talking about awesome pitching performances, want to highlight George Kirby as well. He tied a career high with 10 strikeouts up against the Twins, 7 shutout innings, 4 hits, of course, 0 walks because George Kirby. Career high 20 swinging strikes on 99 pitches, 12 on the fastball, 4 on the slider, 2 on the sinker, 1 on curve, 1 on splitter. Velocity was up a decent amount. The slider was up nearly 2 miles per hour. The curve was up almost 1 mile per hour. Didn't really notice anything different in the pitch mix, but all of a sudden you look at Kirby too. It felt like he had some blow up starts, but he still has a 3.23 ERA, a 104 WHIP. Not as many strikeouts as those aces, those top 20, 24 starting pitchers. But Welsh, George Kirby is basically living up to everything, at least what you thought he could be, because I know you were very excited about him coming into the season.
Yeah, I love command pitchers, and I think I'd like loving him more and more. I love the idea, even though it's like so childish, that he gets like so mad about the walks and inning home runs. He just gets so mad and he punches. I'm actually looking at his pitch 3D chart right now, and it's really fascinating on Baseball Savant too, because the coverage he has in the zone, his fastball just lived in the upper half. I'm looking here. I can easily tell you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fastballs thrown in this game were on the bottom half of the strike zone, the bottom half. Everything else lived up on top. And then he was throwing his slider covering the entire bottom half. So think about that. Your whole top vision, you're just getting fastball punched at you all day long, never at the bottom. And then what's he doing? This slider's coming up in the zone and then just breaking down. It's an interesting pitch distribution. He is one of the smarter pitchers in baseball. And I would love to see more of this. I would love to see more of the aggressiveness, because this is the Kirby that we need. We don't need the Kirby that just kind of like dinks around in the strike zone. Oh, cute. I got my ground ball, got my guy out. Aggressive, hit the zone, try to get that strikeout pitch with the slider, and because this is what he can do. This is, especially in this version of baseball right now, a solid solid command pitcher can work these guys and start building on these bigger strikeout games. So I was a little bit of a sell a little bit early on in the season, just based off of how low the strikeout numbers were going. He didn't seem motivated to try to change that, and he wanted to just continue on his path. And now he's adjusting more, and I'm more back in love. We're falling back in love. We're renewing our vows.
Just to put things in perspective, I don't want to diminish this start, obviously, but
Come on.
the Twins do strike out a lot. They have the highest strikeout rate against right-handed pitching at 27%, but it's not like every pitcher is racking up 10 strikeouts against the Twins. So really impressive start for George Kirby, and if that velocity remains up, maybe we could see more strikeouts moving forward for him. We've talked about all of the pitchers so far. I do want to acknowledge two great hitters and just what they've done recently all season long. Matt Olson, 2 for 4 with a double dong, now up to 32 home runs. He trails only Shohei Ohtani for the league lead in homers. He's batting .258, 80 RBI. That is tied for the league lead for Matt Olson. And I pointed this out on Twitter. He was dropped to 5th in the Braves lineup on June 15th. I don't know if it lit a fire under him. I like to create these scenarios in my mind. It might not have mattered at all. But since that point, 27 games, Matt Olson is batting .330 with 14 home runs. So yeah, he's amazing.
And it's been a big topic of conversation on Braves broadcasts because like immediately when they moved him down to the lineup, he went off like this. It may just be happenstance, but you never know. You never know on a psychological level what happens to a player when there's a change like that. And I know at the start of last year, remember they had him batting second as well, the Braves did, and ultimately had to move him down because he just wasn't living up to expectations in the number 2 spot. I think in theory they like his on-base skills in the number 2 spot, but it may be that he ends up changing his approach when he's batting there, and feels more like he can let it rip when he moves down in the lineup. I still think, as hot as he's been lately, he's due to cool off, and we shouldn't count on him being a .260 hitter or a 50 homer guy necessarily. But he's good, obviously, and a top 5 first baseman.
I want to just add real quick, like you can easily look and see he's like top 3 percentile in like max EV and hard hit and expected slug and all that stuff. But also, this is absurd. I don't know if I would love to. I'd probably look in all these guys at who's doing this at a bigger degree. He has an average exit velocity on fastballs. So think about how many fastballs he's seen this year, over 1,000 of them. An average exit velocity, I'm rounding up to 97 miles per hour. So think about what we see in average EVs on players in general, 97 miles an hour on fastball, which might be a little bit to what Scott's saying. Like, that is hard to sustain. And, pitchers are going to continuously try to adjust. And he has a much lower expected batting average versus breaking off-speed pitches than what he's currently doing or the expected from last season. So you could see where an analytical team might try to adjust. But he's also done it for over 1,000 fastballs this year, average 97 miles an hour. He is quite the first baseman, and egg on our face for thinking we should have, waited and just taken Abreu or Vinny Pasquantino later in the drafts.
Yes, Jose Abreu, that guy. I remember talking about him. Matt Olson, I've moved him up. Maybe I'm just reacting too much to this hot stretch, but I moved him up to number 2, first baseman in both formats, head-to-head points and roto based on what he's doing. Scott, you said he's going to slow down. That's likely. I don't think he's going to keep this up all year. I hope you're wrong, because before the season, I bet Matt Olson to lead the league in home runs. And man, that would be a nice chunk of change if I could pull that in. So
payday for you. I hope I'm wrong too.
That's true.
I was looking at stat when you brought up Matt Olson, by the way. I was like looking at stuff, and then I stopped. No one would be able to see this because I wanted to come back to the camera because I wanted to see Scott's face and the smirk you had on. People might have watched, if you're watching on YouTube, you might have seen me start to laugh because you had this magical smirk when he was being talked about. I could just see the happiness inside of you of like, yeah, Braves. Matt Olson.
I wondered if it was going to come up because our two teams just wrapped up a very contentious series that had a heartbreaking loss for each. in the 3 days.
Heartbreaking loss and a weird moment. The Kevin Ginkel moment I keep thinking about. I don't know if I didn't research any interview of why he did that to Acuna. I don't know if we ever found that out, but yeah, that was an incredible series and an incredible. I thought, by the way, this morning, I thought tonight was going to be incredible because we were going to have like a perfect game thrown with the other pitcher striking out 20. Like that's what I thought we were in for with how that game went today. Without Strider. Yeah, I know with 5 innings in, it looked like that was going to happen. I thought we were going to have this magical day.
Well, and the Strider start today was frustrating because he ended up giving up 4 runs in 6 innings, had 13 strikeouts, was working into the 7th with a shutout. All 4 runs came in the 7th before he recorded an out. And it was for those first 6 innings, it was the best Strider I've ever seen. Like they could not touch him.
And the Diamondbacks don't strike out. Like they're not a heavy, aggressive strikeout team. So what he was doing was absurd. And on the other end of that, Scott, that was the best Zach Gallen you've seen all year. 5 perfect innings. He was perfect while Strider was looking like the best pitcher in baseball as well.
He ended up having 26 swinging strikes, did Strider. It was just a situation in the 7th inning. He walks a guy on a 3-2 count. Could have, that at bat seemed like it could have gone either way. Then he's ahead on Christian Walker, ends up plunking him, and then it's a 3-run homer to the rookie Dominique Canzone. And then they keep him in the game, and he gives up another homer. So like they couldn't touch him until they could, and he ended up elevating his ERA even more. It's again closing in on 4 now. And I think it's like 3.75. 4 is kind of rounding up a little too much. But it kind of speaks to the whole pitching environment where even like Spencer Strider's the most talented pitcher in baseball. I think everybody would agree at this point. Maybe DeGrom, if he was healthy, would be in the discussion, but he's very unhealthy right now. So, and yet he's struggling to keep his ERA low. He seems to have these like innings where it all falls apart on him. And, as the innings accumulate, his career high is only like 130. Is that going to make it even harder for him to be as consistent as we'd like him to be? I don't know. I only own Spencer Strider in 1 league or 2 leagues actually, but they're both like dynasty leagues. So your approach to him is obviously very different in that format. But I would be pretty frustrated if I know I just have him through the end of this year and these starts keep happening.
Well, you know what? You could draft him again next year if you play redraft, but it's probably going to cost you a 1st-round pick with Spencer Strider. Last name I wanted to acknowledge, I mentioned there were 2 great hitters here. Christian Yelich, 3 for 4 with his 14th home run. He's batting .287. He also has 21 steals and .856 OPS. He entered Thursday as the 9th overall player in Roto, not 9th outfielder. 9th overall player, 11th best hitter in head-to-head points. Fantastic bounce-back season for Christian Yelich. Let's take our first break, and when we return, Elly De La Cruz kind of struggling right now. Byron Buxton also struggling. What do we do? We'll talk about it right after this.
In case you're new here, we're here to make history. We are more than the names on our back. We're the team on the front, the country on our shoulders, the city behind us, and the fire inside us. The best in the world. We got us. We don't just play the world's game. We run it.
Welcome back, and we want to offer a warm welcome to the newest podcast in the CBS Sports family and another fantasy football show. That's right, Fantasy Football Today Dynasty launched this week with the insight you need to know to dominate your Dynasty League. Join host Heath Cummings and other familiar faces and voices from the FFT crew each week as they bring you Dynasty mock drafts, deep sleepers, risers and fallers, and much more. Download and follow Fantasy Football Today Dynasty wherever you find this podcast. And if you're watching us rather on YouTube, we've got that QR code up on the screen. You can scan that. That will take you right to the Fantasy Football Today Dynasty podcast feed. Speaking of Dynasty, a very young, exciting player we've talked about all season long, Elly De La Cruz. He's kind of going through it right now, which I think is reasonable. Obviously, he's a rookie. He strikes out a lot. He hits a lot of ground balls. Let's talk about it. He went 1 for 4 with a walk and a strikeout. 7 games post All-Star break. It's a very small sample size. He's 2 for 28 that is a .071 batting average with 12 strikeouts. That is a 40% strikeout rate. Still hitting the ball really hard. Welsh, I had people tweeting, they're sending in emails. What's going on with Elly De La Cruz? I think the answer is he's a rookie, and this is probably going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been pretty transparent about this the whole time with all my worries. I know you guys have been the same. I think a lot of people are. One of the bigger problems has been the amount of people that didn't want to hear it. Like, this can happen. When you hear, oh, hey, by the way, this guy who has a 30% strikeout rate, a really worrisome low barrel rate. It's a 4% barrel rate. That's not something we want to see. We want to see a little bit of a higher barrel rate out of these elite players with bad strikeout numbers and a very worrisome ground ball rate. Like, yes, he has all the talent in the world, but those are pieces that are going to bring him down at some point. And that's what you're seeing. Like, it's a horrid start to the back half of the All-Star break. But I think this was always the worry. I just did a draft similar to, we did that second half, like 2-round mock you did with me and Bogman. I did a format of a league this year where we actually split. So we did our player pool and we paid, and the first half was roto. So we ended at the All-Star break in the first half of the league, which I won, and I got paid. Then the person who won got the first pick we did right before the season started, and we were doing head-to-heads into the playoffs. So it's a 2-split format. So also it kind of kept people in it so you didn't hate everything and stop playing. Well, I'm leading into all of this. Elly De La Cruz went 6 in that league. He went 6 overall. I would not have. Corbin Carroll went 3. I wouldn't have probably done that. Elly went 6. The hype is there because every day you also see, you're like, oh, he threw 99.5. This is awesome. It's like, okay, that doesn't help our fantasy leagues. He also has bad strikeout rates and all these things. So yes, he's a rookie. He's bound to some of these problems. I don't know why anybody's surprised about it. I think people are panicking because of how bad it is. But he has these like underlying things that can bring him down. He also has the things that will bring him right back up. One of the fastest players in baseball. He has 17 stolen bases. I believe he is number 1 in stolen bases in the last 30 days. There's no other player with his amount of games played with 15, 10 or more stolen base. He is, the last month, the most elite base stealer in like 38 games or whatever it is. The power hasn't quite been there. And his expected batting average actually is kind of sustainable to where he is. He's hitting 279. It's 257 XBA. The problem is your expectations to who he is. Rookies are volatile. He'll get right, and then everyone can celebrate, Scott.
Yeah, no, I was going to point out the main thing he's done for fantasy purposes this so far is steal a lot of bases. Like that's been the main thing driving his value to such heights. It's just been such an insanely good stolen base rate. So I think and I just came up with this now. I think the way I want to think of Elly De La Cruz rest of season is Jordan Walker's bat with Ronald Acuna's speed, which is still a very high-end player, but is it a first-round player? Probably not. And in our redraft of the first 2 rounds, we were careful not to take him in round 1 either. He certainly has that kind of upside, does Elly De La Cruz, but it's a big leap to say he's already ready to make good on it.
So I looked up, since Elly De La Cruz was called up on June 6th, he has the 17 steals. There is one player who has more. Ronald Acuna, who has 18 steals.
I think that just changed. I looked at that stat a couple days ago. So yeah, I think over the Diamondbacks game that did change.
Yeah, so elite speed there for Elly De La Cruz. And look, we don't want to come on here and, poo-poo one of the young, fun players in the game, but, we have to be objective. We have to tell you what the stats are saying right now, and this is what's going on with Elly De La Cruz. Obviously, we're not benching him. Just ride the ups and downs. I think we're going to get a lot of ups still here in the second half of him.
And, let me just add, remember when he first came up, and I was on with you guys, and I think it was actually the 3 of us, and I said, he's like shortstop, what did I say, 7 or 8 for the rest of the year. And then 2 weeks later, that sounded silly. But what ends up happening is everyone's expectation came to not just shortstop 7 or 8 or 5. He's a first-round player. Everyone's talking about him as a first-round player. Well, guess what's going to happen? He's going to level back down. I don't know what he is right now. He's probably going to end exactly what we talked, 6, 7. That'll be the shortstop. It's more volatile. Head-to-head leagues, that's going to feel a little bit worse. Points leagues, this is really bad right now for a lot of people. But he will even out and still be valuable. It's just I think all of our expectations grew way bigger than his stats.
Well, even and I know we keep extending this conversation
sorry.
longer and longer, but even in points leagues, because he's stealing at such a great rate, and at least in CBS leagues, steals are worth 2 points apiece. It's gone down quite a bit, but he's still 3.53 points per game overall, which is, better than Wander Franco, who, points leagues would be his best format, better than Francisco Lindor, Bobby Witt, worse than Fernando Tatis and Corey Seager. But, basically in that range of shortstop, still performed like an elite shortstop to this point.
Would you rather have Franco or Elly rest of the season?
I would rather have Wander Franco, regardless of the format.
Same here. And Frank, I thought we saw someone tweet us about a trade, and I think they got Franco, and I think we were like, yeah, that's great. I think he did a good job.
Yeah, sounds good to me. We did a 2-round mock draft for heading into the second half. We did 24 picks worth, and we didn't have Elly De La Cruz in it, and we did have Wander Franco in it. And, people probably lost their minds. We didn't have Elly in the first 2 rounds, but it's too small of a sample size at that point. It was only 30 games. Personally, I think we just need to see more. What do we do with Byron Buxton? We've been getting some questions about him as well. He went 0 for 4 with 2 more strikeouts here on Thursday. He is now batting 193, 15 homers, 8 steals. Okay, that's nice. Helps in category leagues. 685 OPS. However, we were just talking about points leagues. He is averaging 2.5 fantasy points per game. That is tied for 62nd among outfielders. You know how long it took me to count 62 outfielders to see where Byron Buxton was on the list?
I'll tell you my trick for that after the show.
Please do. Scott, what do we do with Byron Buxton? Do you dare consider dropping him in shallower leagues?
I never get to talk about Byron Buxton because that's Chris Towers' guy. So I just sit back and listen.
Chris isn't here, so now we could bash Byron Buxton.
What was the question you asked me? Drop him in shallow leagues?
Get rid of him.
I think he's pretty expendable in 3 outfielder leagues, certainly in points leagues. That's not to say he couldn't get crazy hot and we're picking him back up again, but you could say that about so many players. I just don't think you're going to want to ride the week to week with Buxton. And apart from what year was it, 2021, or was it longer ago than that, where he looked like an MVP candidate? He's been more like what we've seen this year than not throughout his career. And that one season is just looking like pretty much an aberration at this point.
I feel like Byron Buxton is the ghost of Christmas past for Elly De La Cruz. Like Byron Buxton is like the worst case of where like everything that went wrong is there. Because you're seeing Buxton like 30+% K percentage, huge hard hit numbers, but Buxton doesn't steal, he doesn't hit. And that's like the worst living case of if Elly were to stop running, and you see the K percentages and stuff like that, because the sky was the limit with Buxton. Buxton was one of the most exciting players for years. I've always been a huge proponent of him. He could be the #1 player in a given month when he starts popping off homers. The stolen bases went down. The consistency as far as how much he could hit or how consistently he could hit has gone down. Though he still hits the ball hard, it's just not there. It's the lowest barrel percentage over the last 3 years, and everything is getting worse and worse. And it is the 3rd worst. It's actually amazing. I'm looking at this. Byron Buxton has had a 30% plus K percentage in 4 seasons he's played in the majors, which is crazy how much we built him up, including the first 2 and the last 2. That's not good.
So I wanted to confirm where I have him ranked. 49th among outfielders rest of season, which is, I would say that's fringy in 3 outfielder leagues.
Yep. And look, and obviously for anyone playing in 5 outfielder leagues, you're holding on to Buxton. He plays when he's healthy, obviously, and he still contributes some power and speed. But yeah, I think in those shallower 3 outfielder points leagues, I think you probably can move on from Byron Buxton.
Frank, how many months this year has he hit under 200 of the 5 registered months?
4?
3 of the 5 months he has hit under 200. Yep. I'm done.
Chris Towers has Byron Buxton 19th, by the way.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
I probably have him, I want to say, somewhere in between there. Do you have it, Scott?
You have him 34th. So 19th, 34th, 49th. That's the range
there you
of
go.
Buxton rankings.
That sounds like the Byron Buxton experience completely. Do either of these pitch mix changes? Let's slide back over to pitching. 2 names that could be out there in some shallower leagues. Kyle Gibson racked up the whiffs at Tampa Bay. 6 innings, 3 runs, 8 strikeouts, 19 swinging strikes in this one. And I noticed he made his sweeper the most used pitch in this start, 22% usage. And it's been a really good pitch for Kyle Gibson this year. He also more than doubled his curveball usage in this start. It's also been a very good whiff pitch for Kyle Gibson. He's 74% rostered. And JP France had a strong start at the Oakland A's. 7 innings of 1-run ball with 5 strikeouts. And he went heavy changeup. It was his most used pitch, 35% usage entering the start. He only used it 14% of the time. And it's also a really good pitch for JP France. Scott, do either of these pitch mix changes matter? JP France and Kyle Gibson.
Well, I don't know if you remember the conversation, but with France a few weeks ago, I was saying I wish he'd throw his changeup and or slider more because they both have good whiff rates. And he was succeeding in spite of it. He wasn't getting many strikeouts at all. So I think he was just happy to stick with the approach that got him there. But JP France suddenly has a bad start last time out, and then this time out, he's throwing that changeup more than twice as much as usual, and turns in a pretty good stat line. Turns in, let's see, how many strikeouts did JP France end up? 5 in 7 innings at Oakland. Okay, so that's not great, but 12 whiffs on 93 pitches is definitely a step in the right direction for JP France. He's trying to join the ranks of the Glob, I would say. Like, I was skeptical he could ever even be that good, and I'm a little more open to the idea. I don't think he has high-end potential or anything like that. But if you want him on your roster as somebody to stream with the right matchups whenever he has a 2-start week, I would say JP France, particularly if he sticks with this change, has earned it to this point. I'm a little more skeptical of Kyle Gibson just because he's in his mid-30s now, and we've gone down this road a few times with him before. I know he hasn't thrown a sweeper forever, but he's had years where his slider got good whiff totals, and he'd occasionally pop off with a start like this and still end up being typical Kyle Gibson with the ERA at or over 4. And doesn't mean he can't be a useful streamer given that he pitches for a good team, and when he does go well, he works deep into starts. But I don't see him turning over a new leaf at this stage of his career.
No pitch mix changes with these two, but Welsh, you let me know if anything here with these pitchers. Michael Lorenzen extended his scoreless streak to 21 2/3 innings. He was at the Royals, 7 shutout with 3 strikeouts. It's the Royals, but it's also a really good start. Jose Quintana made his Mets debut, 5 innings, 2 runs, 3 strikeouts there. Welsh, do either of these guys matter? Michael Lorenzen and Jose Quintana.
I'm going to be a little dismissive, and sometimes when I am, it's for the wrong reasons, I suppose, of Jose Quintana. I don't have a lot of excitement. I actually am kind of into Michael Lorenzen, and let me give you the first basis for it. I think this could be a trade option of a player that could go to a team where he can have a lot more offensive support and be in a better environment. So I think that in general, more wins, more run support, better defense around him, maybe even better coaching to pitch up, which you obviously seen from him now. That is one positive, because that team, like, I don't know if Eduardo Rodriguez is going to pitch another game, and I don't know if Michael Lorenzen is going to pitch another game, probably one, but if you move on, that's great. The fastball has been better. Last year, fastball had a batting average against of 247 with a very similar expected batting average of 241. This year, 176 against with an expected batting average still under 200. As well, you're just seeing the whiffs go up. Slider and changeup have been relatively effective. So I don't know. I mean, he doesn't put up incredibly exciting numbers, but I do think this is somebody that fits in the stream. And I think if he's moved to a team, Astros, I don't know, someone that's trying to win, not the Diamondbacks probably, but an Astros, a Braves team, something like that, I could get a little bit more excited about him, and he might be a really cheap, viable option that could go from streaming to maybe tiny bit more trustable.
I mean, that's the most optimistic take I think anyone's given for Lorenzen on this podcast
Ever.
all year. But it is. I am curious why he's getting these results, because 3-start stretch here, no earned runs, only 8 hits and 18 2/3 innings. That's the number that sticks out to me more. Not just he's managed to avoid giving up runs during a stretch, but 8 hits and 18 and a third innings is obviously an insanely low hit rate. And he had a stretch like that earlier this year where it was like, this guy's not giving up any hits. What's going on? In between, he looked more like the Michael Lorenzen we've always known, and so it was easy to write him off. The ERA climbed over 4, all of that. I will point out that over these last 3 starts, his opponents were Oakland, Seattle in Seattle, and Kansas City in Kansas City. So it may just be that he's making bank against bad offenses. I'm not willing to say Lorenzen's any more than a streamer yet, but I do have him as a streaming option for this upcoming week because he's in line for 2 starts.
Assuming he sticks with the Tigers, I guess.
Assuming, that's a good point.
Right? So those matchups would be the Angels and at the Marlins next week for Michael Lorenzen. And there was a report from John Morosi of MLB Network that said the Astros and Rays are among teams looking into Michael Lorenzen.
I mean, get out of here.
I mean, both of those,
give me him on both of those teams, please.
Let's quickly get into some news and notes before we wrap up with our Week 18 preview. Yordan Alvarez is expected to play Friday and Saturday at AAA before returning to the Astros on Monday. Good news. Love to see it. Cedric Mullins said Thursday that he's not sure how long he'll be sidelined with this current right adductor strain. We had a classic baseball injury alert. Jared Kelenic was placed in the IL with a fractured left foot. How did he do it? He kicked a water cooler following a strikeout, and then he gave a very passionate interview inside of the dugout where he was apologizing profusely. But I mean, it's your fault. Jared Kelenic is kind of a bonehead thing to do. Mariners prospect Cade Marlowe was recalled from AAA where he was batting .255 with 11 homers and 25 steals. He has put up some monster numbers in the past. Welsh, is there anything here with Cade Marlowe?
Yeah, I'd like to see some regular playing time for him. He's got some big old raw power that I'd love to see go, but it really seems like he's taking a big step back on pitch recognition. And maybe that, if you want to start piecing things together, we have a lot more sweeper sliders this year. I think that is something that he is dealing with, and it hasn't been a huge positive turn. So Marlowe might be one of those guys that has an early on success rate that then tapers back when you get a lot of secondary pitches on him. Side note to it, and it's a homerish thing, but I prefer Dominic Canzone to him. I think Dominic Canzone is just getting started. We talked about him earlier. Monster numbers in the minors. Even though he's striking out a little bit now, he's a much more patient hitter. I would bet on Canzone over Marlowe, but both of these guys aren't anything you should be running at the wire for.
Starling Marte was placed on the IL with migraines, retroactive to July 17th. Tyler O'Neill was activated Thursday, batting 7th in the Cardinals lineup and playing left field. Tommy Edman is scheduled to begin taking live at-bats early next week. He's been out since July 7th with a wrist injury. Andrew Vaughn has missed the last 2 games after fouling a ball off his left foot Tuesday. X-rays came back negative. Tommy Pham exited Thursday with that recurring right groin discomfort. He said he's optimistic he won't require a trip to the IL. Bobby Miller has been cleared to start Saturday against the Rangers. He had dealt with right knee discomfort in his start last weekend. Mason Miller will throw a 20-pitch bullpen session Saturday. He's been out since May 11th with a mild UCL sprain in his right elbow. Francisco Mejia exited Thursday with left knee discomfort. Josh Donaldson was transferred to the 60-day IL, which means he'll miss the rest of the season. Good riddance. Let's take our final break, and when we return, we'll get into our Week 18 preview here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
In case you're new here, we're here to make history. We are more than the names on our back. We're the team on the front, the country on our shoulders, the city behind us, and the fire inside us. The best in the world. We got us. We don't just play the world's game. We run it.
Welcome back, and let's get into our Week 18 preview. We'll start things off with the schedule for next week. 6 teams have 5 games. The Rays, Cubs, Braves, Marlins, Yankees, and the A's. 20 teams have 6 games, and 4 teams have 7 games. The Nationals, Cardinals, Tigers, and Guardians. Starters sit these 2 start pitchers, and to be perfectly honest, there's not many names to ask about because There's a top tier that's very obvious. You're starting those names in if they're 2-star pitchers, you're starting them. Then Scott has a bunch of streamers, and then there's just everybody on the bottom. So I'll ask you about
like half the list is in the no thanks tier almost.
Yeah. So I think I know where these answers are going to go. Scott, Christopher Sanchez versus the Orioles and at the Pirates. What do you think?
He's high in the no thanks tier, but I'd have to be pretty desperate to use him still.
All right. Steven Matz has pitched solid in 2 of his last 3 starts. Welsh, he is at your Diamondbacks and home against the Cubs.
No chance. No,
No
I would
chance.
rather go Christopher Sanchez than Matz. No chance.
I agree with that as well. Graham Ashcraft has pitched better recently, but he's at the Brewers and at the Dodgers. Scott?
Nope, don't trust it.
And I'm not even going to ask about Ross Stripling. 2-star pitchers to add and stream. Scott, we have 2, 4, 6, 8. 8 names. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is. The easy one, the obvious one. So obvious, in fact, I almost left him out of my sleeper pitchers for this week. It's Kenta Maeda, who is going against the Mariners and at Kansas City. 2 great matchups after coming off a great start. And really 2 of his last 3 starts have been awesome. And I found this great stat yesterday writing the waiver wire column for Kenta Maeda. So you look at his season-long numbers, his ERA is over 5. And that would kind of scare you away. But he did have a start where he gave up 10 earned runs. And that start was right before he went on the IL with the strained triceps. You got to think it was impacting him in that start. If you remove that 10-run start for Kenta Maeda, he has a 3.20 ERA, a 107 whip, 11 K per 9. Numbers that are very similar to the ones that made him the Cy Young runner-up in the short 2020 season. And remember the following season, he ended up needing Tommy John surgery. He's talked about how he didn't feel like he could let the ball go leading up to that Tommy John surgery. So it made sense why he struggled that year. So Kenta Maeda might be on the verge of being a high-end pitcher again. And then he has these 2 great matchups. So it's a good time to test the theory. He's still available in a third of CBS Sports Leagues. Okay, we also have Aaron Savale. He's going against the Royals and the White Sox. 2 good matchups, and he's been pitching well. Dean Kramer, boomer bust, but you got to love the supporting cast. The fact he has 10 wins on the year. He's at the Phillies and then against the Yankees, who stink without Aaron Judge. Logan Allen, Royals and White Sox, his 2 matchups, same as Savale. They're teammates. Imagine that. Kyle Hendricks, White Sox and Cardinals. He's coming off a good start. It's a bit further down the list. I think I'd leave him for points leagues almost certainly. But, he's looked pretty good for the most part. Michael Lorenzen, who we just talked about, first matchup is tough against the Angels, but then he's at Miami, which is favorable. He's been making good on those matchups recently. And then Griffin Canning, he may not be a 2-start pitcher because so many teams have so many off days this week. It's possible the Angels just go 5-man this time through because they'll still be able to give Ohtani appropriate rest. This kind of presumes they do that. Griffin Canning is a 2-star pitcher, that they skip Chase Silseth, as good as he looked in his last start. In which case Canning would start at Detroit, at Toronto. But even if they cut him down to just 1 start, it's at Detroit. So Griffin Canning's a deserving streamer either way.
And the 3 single-start streamers on this list, Gavin Williams versus the Royals, Grayson Rodriguez versus the lowly Yankees, assuming Aaron Judge is not back. Some rumors out there he could be back next week. And Seth Lugo versus the Pirates. Welsh, how would you rank that group? Gavin Williams versus KC, Grayson versus the Yankees, and Seth Lugo versus the Pirates.
I think I would rank it how you have it. I love going up against the Royals anytime. So I'm going to just kind of, jump onto any matchup there. And Gavin Williams' strikeout numbers haven't been there. The walks have been a little bit up, but I'm still a big believer. Why I say I'm not definitive is Grayson, outside of getting into that, 5th or 6th, looked really good in that, that first start back. I mean, the fastball hitting 101, scrapping the cutter, I think was a great move. The Yankees offense has been really struggling. It's just, he can fall apart like that. And we're seeing it happen. That is the most consistent thing about him, even though the pitch mix has changed. So if you want a little bit more upside, maybe it's Grayson. but I'll go with Gavin Williams in the great matchup, Grayson Rodriguez, and then Seth Lugo at the bottom.
Man, if they have like snapping Olympics or snap competitions, Welsh, we got to sign you up because
can I do like ADR for like snapping? Is that a good one? So let's go. Hold on. That's pretty good.
Yes,
You're using like your pinky and your thumb, right? Or your ring finger and your thumb?
No, it's my the finger I'm not going to solely show you. And is that am I doing it weird?
It looked weird the way you did it. Just no. I think
that's
middle finger is normal. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say so. Let's move over to the hitters. The best hitter matchups for Week 18: the Rockies, Guardians, Cardinals, Cubs, and the A's. The worst hitter matchups: Marlins, Red Sox, Pirates, Royals, and the Rays. By the way, I didn't mention the Rockies earlier. They have 6 games next week, 3 at Washington, 3 at home against Oakland. So if you're just wondering about who's playing in Coors Field next week, the Oakland A's will be there visiting the Rockies. Scott, you are up once again. Your favorite sleeper hitters for next week?
I do want to point out also, because so many teams have so many off days, you'll notice the Athletics are 5th for best hitter matchups. That's even though they're playing 5 games. I don't know that I've ever had a 5-game team in the best hitter matchups before, but 3 of them are at Colorado. Anywho, nobody worth starting from the Athletics, because I thought about Brent Rooker, but lately he's been sitting against righties, and that's not going to work. Okay, from the Rockies, CJ Cron, he's my favorite sleeper hitter this week, and he has looked like CJ Cron again since coming off the IL. I'm kind of surprised he's as available as he is, considering he was basically must start each of the last 2 years.
Scott, I just have to say, I love that Crone is on this list, because if you remember last year, he was on sleeper hitters every single week.
Was he? I thought he was too high end. You sure it wasn't 2 years ago?
It might have been 2 years ago, but there was one of these years they all just kind of blend together at this point.
Yeah. Well, he's back, baby.
He was on the list every week. I love it.
CJ Cron. Got to go with the Twins tandem of Edward Julian and Alex Kirilloff, because as I look at it right now, only one lefty on the schedule for the Twins. That affects Julian especially. Also, 3-game series against the Royals pitching staff in Kansas City, but still, Royals have no good pitchers. Seiya Suzuki has been hitting pretty well lately. I pointed out last week that he has particularly good numbers against left-handers, and the Cubs have 3 on the schedule again this week. Spencer Torkelson's been hot, and the Tigers are one of the few teams with 7 games this week. Mickey Moniak, the Angels have no left-handers on the schedule. Their matchups could be better, but they could be worse too. And so the fact he's going to start all 6 of their games with the kinds of numbers Moniak has, I think, makes him a good play. CJ Abrams with the Nationals having 7 games. Okay. Also, Lars Nootbaar with the Cardinals having good matchups. Josh Bell with the Guardians having good matchups. And here's an interesting one for you. Wilmer Flores, who homered again on Thursday. That gives him 4 home runs in 4 games. And 2 of those games he started against righties even. So, like, the Giants are rolling with him. He's hot. They have pretty good matchups this week against the Tigers. Oh, no, 1 game against the Tigers, 2 games against the Athletics, which is even better than the Tigers, and then 3 games against the Red Sox. So if you need a versatile player to round out your lineup this week, Wilmer Flores, not a bad choice.
And I love that you called out Wilmer Flores, because I had him in the notes. I was going to bring him up as a potential sleeper hitter for next week for the reasons you mentioned. 16 games since coming off the IL, 389 batting average with 5 home runs for Wilmer Flores. And if this is correct, if the website is correct, 6 games next week, 4 against lefties. And Wilmer Flores crushes left-handed pitching. So I love that call out for Wilmer Flores. One name I also wanted to mention, Will Benson. He went 2 for 3 with a walk, run, RBI, and his 9th steal on Thursday. He's been great since being recalled back in May. And again, if the matchups are correct on the site, 6 games next week, it looks like they're all against righties.
They are all against righties. There are some tough pitchers in there. It's not the worst schedule. I mean, you didn't mention the Reds among the 5 worst hitter matchups, but it's a little iffy. Still, with all the righties on the schedule, you could make a case for Benson. And I was tempted to put Jake Fraley on this list again with all those righties, but I just feel like it'd be Fraley burnout at this point, because I don't know how many weeks in a row I've had him on here. But certainly you could justify starting him too.
Jake Fraley, the new CJ Cron, baby. Let's get him on the list every single week until, he he's rostered in enough leagues. Before we wrap up, I've got some bullpen updates and streamers for the weekend. Welsh, I did want to ask you about, I know you've got some prospect updates that that you mentioned to me. There's a starting pitcher in the Diamondbacks organization that you think could make an impact down the stretch, and names that you think could be up after the trade deadline. Who you got?
Yes. So someone I was talking about earlier in the week, we'll see what happens. Diamondbacks only have, I think, 3 starting pitchers on their roster. I actually went out to the Diamondbacks complex today, 118 degrees, because Merrill Kelly was supposed to pitch, and he didn't. Why didn't he pitch? I'm going to try to go again tomorrow and see if he's there. They need pitchers. One of the reasons I've been picking around, because Brandon Pfaadt is still the same Brandon Pfaadt. But Bryce Jarvis has been very interesting with the team. 2 straight starts with 6 or more strikeouts. And one of the big things that's changed with him is the pitch mix. He has been going heavy slider. He has a 40% swing and miss on the slider in 4 straight starts, plus one of them has a 70%. And that has become his primary pitch over the last 2 starts. And I don't believe he's given up a run in his last 2. He's averaging 96 on the fastball. He's hitting 96 on the fastball, averaging close to 96. The slider has gained over 100 RPM spin overall on the pitch. And it's become a lot more dominant. And he's been, and this is PCL numbers, there's some worry that he might be a quintessential relief player. He's not a 2-pitch pitcher, but he's commanding better. He's a very high-end analytical pitcher, and I think he's just going to get an opportunity soon. So we'll see. Diamondbacks, blah, blah, blah. But Bryce Jarvis has been very interesting with that pitch mix change of going heavy slider, and we have seen lots of guys have that success this year. Bryce Elder until recently, and so forth. We know the slider has been a big dominant pitch, and he has made that change, and he is very, very hyper aware of where he's at. And the only other thing that you were mentioning, start keeping on your mind about these prospects that could benefit from players being traded away. Matt Mervis would be one of those. The rumors with Cody Bellinger, I think Matt Mervis might be one of those players that is going to get some time. If the Cubs trade Marcus Stroman, Ben Brown is another player we might be able to see soon. Ronnie Mauricio would be another one of those if the Mets were to decide to maybe move Tommy Pham. They've been looking for some outfield. Mauricio has even played around in the outfield. So there are quite a few rookies and prospects that are going to get some playing time here in the very, very near future while other players are being traded. There's going to be a benefit across the board. And speaking of trades, I just want to put this out there. I think Tyler O'Neill is getting traded to the Mariners. To the Mariners. I think that is 100% happening in my mind. I'm just going to put it out there. I think
where
that
he started.
trade. Yep,
Revenge
going
trade.
back. I saw him. He actually, when they were doing the WBC, him and Freddie Freeman were over at the Mariners camp doing BP. I was there, and he came out and just flooded everybody. He talked about how much he missed this place. He loved the place. He was talking to security. He was talking to fans that were there to see Mariner fans. He loves it there. I think it's a match made in heaven. And I'm just going to throw that out there. When you're talking about prospects that'll get more time, I think that benefits Jordan Walker even more. So there's no weirdness in the outfield. And Tyler O'Neill gets traded to the Mariners. Just lock that in.
I want to see Alec Burleson play more. I think there's something there. Of course, we all think Jordan Walker. There's something there with Jordan Walker, but
Not going to be Dylan Carlson is what we know.
yeah.
There have been rumors that the Yankees have been poking around on Dylan Carlson, so we'll see what happens there as well. If you want to hear more about prospects, you can listen to our Saturday episode of Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, or you can go onto the website, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball, and you could read Scott's latest prospects to stash. Let's wrap up with the call to the bullpen. Very few updates here for the Braves. Raisel Iglesias allowed 2 base runners, but picked up his 7th save. For the Tigers, Alex Lang was unavailable, so Jason Foley picked up his 4th save. For the Orioles, Felix Bautista threw 2 hitless innings with 3 strikeouts, wound up with his 5th win. The Mountain. He is amazing.
Have we talked enough about how he's the best closer in fantasy now, right?
I don't have him ranked that way, but I probably should.
You should.
He's awesome. I mean,
I took a closer pretty high in that like redraft second half thing. I didn't take him, and I think I was the first person to take a closer. I think I made a mistake. I think he's right in that range.
Who did you take?
I think I either took Hader or Devin Williams. I took one of those. I just kind of went chalk, and I don't know. I should have played it a little bit harder because Batista's amazing.
I do have Hader as the number 2 closer.
I think it was Hader that I took.
He doesn't get as much volume as Bautista.
And the trade rumors make him a little bit more scary too.
And like Bautista's like 18K per 9. I mean, Hader's still great as far as that goes, but no, I got Bautista number 1.
Remember that time when Felix Bautista had a shoulder thing in the spring training and didn't really matter. He is by far my most drafted relief pitcher. I it didn't matter to me. I just kept drafting him. So I'm happy I did it. For the Astros, Ryan Presley struck out 1 for his 22nd save. Let's wrap up with to stream or not to stream. And we'll start with Friday. And who were the names? I said yesterday, I think it was Seth Lugo at the Tigers, Clark Schmidt versus the Royals, and I think we threw out Alec Marsh at the Yankees, but it's a little scary.
I prefer Reese Olson against the Padres to Alec Marsh.
Okay.
I think I prefer him to Clark Schmidt too.
I kind of like Cutter Crawford. I'm going to throw this out there. He's been pretty good as of late. Maybe it's a little bit of scarier matchup against the Mets. I'm looking here in his last 2. Yeah, I guess he hasn't given up more than 3 in his last 3 starts, but just throwing that back out there.
The Mets, by the way, are 15th in WOBA against right-handed pitching. So they're, middle of the pack, but he has pitched pretty well. That is Cutter Crawford. On Saturday, who do we got here? Anybody interesting? Wow,
Nope.
this is a bad list of pitchers.
Nope, nobody interesting. Move
Not
on.
one. Not one. There's literally not one I'd be like, oh, yeah, that guy.
Matt
I
Manning.
mean, Michaelis at the Cubs.
Nope.
It's a bit of a random number generator, but when it hits, he gives you 6. He gives you 6 or 7 strong innings.
Or
And it's
6
been
or 7
hitting
earned runs. Yeah.
No, I mean, I hear you, but like, what do you expect from a streamer pitcher? Honestly,
That's a good point. Yeah.
I would not do it, but I guess the 3 that I'll throw out there: Michaelis at the Cubs, Josiah Gray versus the Giants, Matt Manning versus the Padres. But again, not much confidence in those. On Sunday, anything better here? Not really. Up and down the list.
Brian Wu, could you do the Toronto? Could you do a bounce back with Wu in Toronto? Mackenzie
could.
Gore versus the Giants, maybe?
I could. Yeah,
Yeah, those two are
who's my
jumping out to
favorite of
me.
the group?
Why are you guys saying his name like that? It's weird.
Woo! What? Woo!
Yeah, Brian. Woo!
Woo!
Come on, Scott.
Woo!
I
I didn't think I could do it without my voice cracking.
I was waiting for Scott to get it on the woos. All right, so we've got Brian Wu versus the Blue Jays, and maybe a Mackenzie Gore versus the Giants. But yeah, Sunday is tough because I think a lot of the aces are on the mound. So I was looking up and down, and there's not really much going there.
Does next week signal the like, oh my gosh, everything's gonna fall apart because the trades and trade deadline and like you can't trust any of the weekend starting? Just kind of throwing that out. Is that next week, or do you even throw that into this week where this is gonna start to be a dicey situation?
It wouldn't surprise me if some people get moved this weekend, but I think for sure next weekend we probably see some action.
Next weekend. It's not going to be a fun week. It's going to be a fun weekend, but it's not going to be a fun weekend if you catch my drift.
We are going to wrap there for Scott and the Welsh. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. We'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.